I will dismantle this oppressive establishment board by board.
Hey guys, my name's DocJade, and welcome to episode 4 of K2SE. Well, time to start tearing everything down. We're going to need a lot of robots for that though, so time to figure out why we aren't making any. A lack of big electric motors, caused by a lack of small ones due to a lack of copper. Because, yet again, the pulverizers are backed up on mineral water. I swore I added a flare stack already. Oh well, I'll disconnect the useless mineral water well, and add a new one. We're also pretty close to backing up on pyroflux, so time for another tank. Actually, I'll make one of the big ones that holds 200,000 fluid. While that crafts, might as well launch the rocket, so we don't waste it when we tear down the silo. The base I have planned out is ratioed for productivity 2 modules, so we'll need to research those. After researching that, there's not really anything left on the list that would be useful for us in the short term. Sure, we could research the umbrella to defend us from that mass ejection, but we'll put it off yet again. 20 hours is plenty of time. We also won't need uranium for the new base, so I'll somewhat carefully tear that out as well. Since all we really need from this base at the moment is construction robots, I'll disconnect everything downstream from them. Sadly, we're going to waste about half a cargo rocket, but oh well, you win some, you lose some. Speaking of lose, let's cut loose the rest of this as well. Actually, there is something else useful we can research. The bigger storage strongboxes, storehouses, and warehouses. We're going to need a lot of room to dump this base into. I'll tear down the crappy mall, finish logistics robots, then slowly pump out more construction robots. We brought back that biogun and never tried it, so let's give it a shot. After severely overestimating its range, I landed a good hit on the nest, which caused a pretty nice cascade. Then I shot at some biters coming towards me, which immediately blew themselves and me up. Oops. After accidentally respawning in space and asphyxiating, I respawned on the ground and got my stuff back. Some lube to expand big electric motor production later, we're slowly making progress on the base dismantlement. But my central nervous system is not a fan of the uranium. We're very quickly filling up on storage, which is a good 5% red splitter for some reason. I'm leaving the reactor up until it fully cools down, since we do need quite a bit of power for all of these bots. After many runs back and forth, I replaced the nuclear reactor with some solar panels. Our rare metals collection also needs to be moved. Slightly annoying. We also need to put this pyroflux somewhere, but I don't want to have to move it around over and over again with pipes, so I'll just barrel all of it. Tearing down the base was taking just a tad too long, so I grabbed some peeps from the Discord. I failed to provide any material safety datasheets or health benefits, which unfortunately caused a few to die from radiation sickness. After cleaning up some graffiti and firing everyone before OSHA could investigate, I threw together some logistics robot production, then started planning out the new bus. Using Factorio Lab for ratio calculation, great website by the way, you should check it out, I planned out the new base to make 1,000 cargo rocket sections per hour, or about 1 full rocket every 6 minutes. The original plan was to make a rocket every minute, but someone told me that was a horrible idea, so I scaled it back. First up is ore washing for copper. We're going to set everything up at full size from the get-go instead of scaling it up later, because I feel like it. Almost everything in this base uses productivity 2 modules, so we're going to need at least 17 chemical plants. But it's always better to overshoot than to undershoot. We don't have those productivity modules yet, so I'll use module inserter to request them all for later. Now for the copper furnaces, which also have productivity because why not? But that does mean the smelting arrays end up quite a bit larger. And please ignore the overzealous use of power poles. Well, that's copper done. Time for iron, which is even more absurd, especially when I build over twice as much refining than I actually need. After hooking that up, it's pretty obvious we aren't going to have all the materials to build a base at this scale, so it's time to bring back the terrible mall, which will be fed by this requester warehouse. I made it slightly smarter this time. Now every container has a global list of items that it wants to hold, so it's slightly less annoying to use. After making sure it works, I'll expand it a bit, then plug in the requester chest, which will automatically request the items the system wants, which are set in this combinator. I'll automate productivity 2 in here, so those can slowly build in the background. Back to iron, time for the smelting array, which is actually the correct size this time. To start the ore washing up, we need iron for the sulfuric acid, so we'll have to hook up at least a few miners right now. We're also in a red belt shortage, which is slightly annoying, so I have to ration with underground belts, since we have an excess of those. I went and plugged in the iron and got one of the friendly biters stuck. Welcome back, Sisyphus. Time for the oil setup. I'll grab some water and hook up the pump jacks. Now for the refineries, which I failed to notice I used the calculator wrong, so it's insanely oversized. Once that was all hooked together, I grabbed some more pipes and watched the bots repair some of the mall. I didn't manage to catch one on camera, but the bots now occasionally fall out of the sky and crash, damaging the stuff around them. And we're in quite the power shortage, but we'll have to ignore it for now. I hooked up the water to the ore washing plants, and then threw a balancer into the output of the iron ore washing, since I know we have a metric truckload of enriched iron chilling in storage. Now we've got a trickle of iron output, and I'll use another one of my Requester strong boxes to pull raw ores out of storage. Then I built wood production, since we'll need it for coke and steel later. Time to crack down the output to the oil refineries, which I still haven't realized is too big. Once that was finished, I finally realized my mistake, but since it's already built, might as well leave it. Now for sulfuric acid, which is nice and easy, but we're running very low on red belts and chemical plants now, so I have to scrounge together the materials to build it. But once it's done, I can plug in the ore washing, which kicks everything into gear. Surprisingly, the solar is holding up, but I doubt there's enough accumulator storage. After remembering to put wood on the bus, time to set up steel production, which takes 6 furnaces for the coke and 17 furnaces for the steel itself. Yes, I know the power poles look horrible, just ignore them. I'll dump the steel production into a storage chest so the mall can grab it, then add a couple more things to the mall. Actually, the mall is pretty far away from the iron and copper supplies, and I didn't leave any room to expand, so time to move it closer to those. The bots weren't too happy about that. Next up is plastic, so time to grab coal for that. Then wait on the mall to make enough belts to actually connect it. The bots have to fly pretty far when they want to pull things out of storage now, so we'll have to move all of that forward too, which is very slow, so I'll do it in the background. To improve power just a tad, I'll add a few more solar panels and a bunch more accumulators. I forgot that ore washing makes dirty water, so we need to get rid of it. Luckily, we can use the filtration plants to get a bit of copper back, although we do get quite a bit of sand as byproduct, so that'll go over to the greenhouses. 12 hours to go on the mass ejection, which we shall ignore yet again. This base currently doesn't take too much power to run, but as those productivity modules make their way into the machines, our power draw is going to more than double. So we should get ahead of that with some more power production. I'll use tanks to buffer any extra steam we produce, but this whole setup is hand-fed anyways, so we'll need to figure out a more permanent solution later. We're still low on belts, and I'm tired of waiting, so here's some temporary belt production, which devours an entire belt of iron. Might as well build a second one to really start pumping them out. Once I felt I had enough, I tore it down, then set up brick production, which will immediately be turned into stone tablets or green circuits. Here's the copper wire, and that's the circuits. Surprisingly, we only need half a belt of them. After pulling the bus up and waiting for the mall to do its job, let's set up plastic, which will go on the other side of green circuits. One chemical plant zone later, now we need to crush the stone into sand and turn it into quartz inside these filtration plants. Then we can smelt that quartz into silicon and start setting up glass. With both of those done, we can add the plastic to start making electronic components, but this spider nest is a tad too close for my liking. So I took them and myself out, but a win is a win. After getting my stuff back, time for the components. With green circuits alongside them and a bit of copper wire, that's red circuits. Although now we're in an inserter shortage, so I had to handcraft those. I brought the bus forward again, then realized it was almost 6 AM and went to bed. A short nap later, I'll test the red circuits. We're going to slam right into this lake. What are we going to do? Guess we'll turn right and go down, which goes swimmingly. But we're still desperately low on power, so time for another permanently temporary solution. Remember all of that pyroflux we barreled? Well, now we do have a use for it. Pyroflux dousing. I thought we'd never use it, but this is the perfect solution for our power generation. Each one of these barrels of pyroflux can make 5,000 steam. So I'll grab this, nab this, and see what we can do with this. The first plan was to immediately stockpile the steam to make a giant buffer of 2 million steam, and put the steam engines off to each side. There was a slight throughput issue with the steam, which is an easy fix, but I also forgot that we get resources as a byproduct. Luckily, I can dump them into the raw ore requester chest to easily sort them back out. But after looking at the setup a bit more, it was pretty apparent that this is not nearly enough steam engines. Doing the math, each chemical plant can support around 30 steam engines, but I like powers of 2, so I'll round up to 32. And since I don't expect the engines to run at full tilt the whole time, each section will get a big tank for a steam buffer. I'll tear down the old setup, making sure not to waste the steam, then start building the perfected Pyroflex power production of doom. Each chemical plant also gets a tank for water, just in case. I only need one assembler to unbarrel the Pyroflex, and they'll start filling up. Although I did decide to connect the tanks together to even out the load, since fluid flow is a bit wacky, and I'll pump the steam from the old setup in. I'm not sure how long our Pyroflex supply will last, but it might be worth to ship it in from other planets if it makes power production this simple. But for now, I'll grab everything we have in storage and throw it in. Then I'll try to improve the mall a bit more by directly plugging in common resources and changing a few request amounts. Time to set up rocket fuel. I think it'll fit in nicely right here. I could make the solid fuel out of the more efficient light oil recipe, but we're already swimming in so much petroleum that it doesn't even matter. What is the matter is not matter this time, but we do need to set up the atmospheric condensers for the rocket fuel, which I have a sneaking suspicion that they'll completely destroy the power network. But we're gonna have to wait and see, because first we need to set up the refineries. Plugged in with petroleum will send the fuel north, we'll use productivity to get all of its worth. But the rocket fuel still needs light oil, so we'll send it on over and bring it to a boil. With one final pipe and some lyrical flare, we'll put the liquid rocket fuel in a tank up there. Now all that's left to automate is the random stuff for our cargo rocket sections. First up is low density structure, so I'll sneak the glass onto the red circuit belt, then throw down the production. Then it's time for heat shielding, which needs stone tablets and sulfur, which I also left behind. So much for a pretty bus. I'll sneak the tablets out, then put sulfur on the other side. We need the same amount of heat shielding production, so I'll just reuse the low density structure setup. Then put those both on the bus. Now for batteries, which we need a surprising amount of. After hooking in the acid, fixing the misplaced belts, and waiting on an underground belt, that's batteries. Now for rocket control units. Batteries, red circuits, glass, and iron plates. We'll need quite a few. Once that's done, onto the bus it goes. The mall can't even keep me supplied with power poles anymore, and we're out of red belts again, which I unfortunately didn't save a copy of the setup for. Bummer. We'll just have to wait on that, but in the meantime we can get started on cargo pods. They take fast inserters and iron chests, so I'll set those up right now. We only need one assembler for the inserters, so I'll just set up everything with direct insertion. There's no need to put this on the bus. Iron chests are as plain as day at night. Then we need steel and red circuits. Steel is already conveniently next to green circuits, so I'll split it off and grab the red circuits from the bus. After fixing inserter drop positions, we can start making the pods, which I once again use way too many power poles for. Now for the rocket fuel tanks, which take red circuits, pipes, pumps, and the boring kind of tank. All of those are very simple to set up, so once again, direct insertion for everything. With that done, we're just waiting on the assemblers. Time to make the rocket sections. They take low density structure, rocket control units, cargo pods, rocket fuel tanks, and heat shielding. Conveniently, and coincidentally, the 3 ingredients we need off the belts are already nicely arranged, so I'll put them straight in. Ah, great. A meteor hit our green circuit production. Luckily, not too much was destroyed. However, one of the power poles in that setup was load-bearing, so the rest of the base lost power. Slightly suboptimal, so I'll fix that. Now we're starting to make the rocket sections. We're going to throw the rocket sections in a chest for now, but since you can only put one section per slot, we'll use the packing recipe to quintuple our storage density. And no, I checked, we can't exploit it for infinite cargo sections. So, the base is fully blueprinted, but we've eaten our entire iron buffer, and our current input is subpar. The nearest iron patch is this one to our west, so after helping the bots finish moving storage over to the mall, I'll clear out the nearby biters. Then I'll make some rails, which, as usual, takes a lot more steel than you would expect. Once I place the drop-off location, I use the satellite view to blueprint the rest of the rail to the patch, which happens to go right over our uranium patch. Fun. To speed up the process of placing the patch path, I'll use a train, which I forget has an equipment grid in K2, but rocket fuel will do for now. After running out of rails and grabbing some more, time to set up power production. Since we're making a ton of extra steam out of Pyroflex, I'll bring it over in a fluid wagon and make the power on site. Also, the copper patch is now completely dry, so I'll need to get another patch of that too. After setting up the iron unloading and steam loading, I'll set the schedule, and we're good to go. Although I should really add some buffers. But loaders are so darn expensive, so we'll have to use inserters. But before that, there's a few biter nests that would get polluted pretty quickly, so we've got to take those out. With them sufficiently held back, I'll add those inserters, then place the unloaders of unloading. Cargo wagons have a grid too? Weird. The patchy patch of copper is still down south, so we'll nab that next. Long term, I don't plan on mining any of the resources on Navis. Other planets have much higher ore richness, so I'll just ship everything in from them. Despite all of the missing buildings, we had enough buffers on belts to make over 60 cargo rocket sections. But now that we've got better supplies of copper and iron, it should start speeding up. Man, this oil setup is ridiculous. I also forgot that we need a new source of coal. Thankfully, there's another patch a tad below the copper. But that's a lot of belts, and we're already low on them. 6 hours! That sounds urgent, but I don't care. Time to get that coal. Well, power completely died. Oh great, our pyroflux buffer ran out. Well, we do make quite the excess of oil products. We could burn some of them off with gas power stations. So I'll start making those. And as a temporary fix, I'll grab some random burnable stuff from storage to tie us over, which does the trick. I decided to burn the liquid rocket fuel. Since it's 5 or so steps into the productivity chain, it ends up being a lot cheaper. And it's extremely energy dense, so it lasts quite a while in the burners. I'll make a few more, and we're still net positive on rocket fuel production. Although it does take oxygen from the atmospheric condensers, so it takes quite a bit of power to make. On the topic of oils, I'll wire cracking up so it doesn't back up on one oil, then take the modules out of the fuel processors, because they take a lot more power than I realized. Now we have more gas power production than steam power. I needed to add a few more things to the mall, so I had to take a U-turn, and we're still waiting on belts for coal. Since the majority of our power comes from burning rocket fuel, I looked to see if we could make it more efficiently. But all of the rocket fuel recipes require either a base element or a chemical compound, which we can make with electrolysis instead of using the atmospheric condensers, but I'm not sure if that would use less power or not, so I left it alone. We're just waiting on productivity modules now, so let's set up the cargo rocket silo. Wait, I never automated these space capsules. We already have everything we need for them, except for solar panels and accumulators. So it's not too big of a deal, but we do have to run a couple more things down the bus now, like rocket fuel. On the bright side, we've got almost a full chest of packed cargo rocket sections now. Down comes the rocket fuel, but to make solar panels down here, I would need to pull silicon, which is pretty far away. So instead, for accumulators and solar panels, I'll sneak them alongside pre-existing production. Accumulators go next to batteries, and solar panels go next to red circuits. Once those were belted down, I'll pull a line for glass, then set up space capsule repairing right next to it. But that needs repair packs, and since we already make those in the mall, I'll use this buffer chest as a knockoff requester chest. Good as done. I'll pop the capsules we have on hand into the chest, then we can finally make this silo, which I instinctively tried to add productivity modules to. A quick pipe for rocket fuel, then we can connect these space capsules and cargo sections. Unpacking the cargo rocket sections is just a tad too slow to make one rocket every 6 minutes, but hopefully those speed modules can push it over the threshold. Some thumb twiddling later. There's our first cargo rocket, built by the new base. The new rocket building base of Navis City turned out pretty well, I think. Almost well enough to pave, but I don't feel like making more concrete, so this'll have to do. And just to check, yes, you can launch packed cargo rocket sections in the rockets, so we don't have to make cargo rocket sections on other planets. We can just ship them the sections from here, and then send back any extra sections from the landing process. Speaking of sending things back, we're really going to need to set up pyroflux delivery as soon as possible. But looking through the planets, I don't see any that spawn with pyroflux on them. Oh, it turns out you make pyroflux out of vulcanite, but we don't have that researched yet. Turgmam has a ton of vulcanite for us to grab, and there's a 0% threat, so no biters. But the planet is waterless. How are we going to make power over there? As for other resources, Saren is the closest planet to us, besides the one we're already standing on. Sarin is mostly oil, but there's also copper and iron ore. It also has no biters, which is convenient. Even though it shows a pretty low percentage of iron ore, looking at the planet, there's a pretty big patch right next to the center of the planet, so that would work for at least a little while. The planet is pretty small, so might as well scan it. But we'll have to go explore those planets next time. I'd like to take a moment to thank my supporters on Ko-fi. And on top of that, I'd like to thank everyone who's been commenting tips, tricks, and ideas for the run. But be careful. If you tell me too much, I won't make as many entertaining mistakes. And that's all for today. My name's DocJade. Bye-bye.